Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
When you grow up as the afterthought in your own family, you learn early how to keep your head down and your heart guarded, but even so, no amount of lowered expectations can dull the sting when it hits you square in the face again and again. My brother Daniel, 2 years older but treated like royalty since the day he cut his first tooth, learned early that all he had to do was flash that crooked smile and the world, or at least our parents, would bend over backward to make sure he never tasted disappointment. I, on the other hand, was the kid who hauled the buckets, mowed the lawns, scrubbed the mower decks, and answered the phones after school while Daniel strutted around town, playing big man on campus. Too busy charming girls and wasting gas in Dad's old pickup to even remember we had a family business to run. Our landscaping company, Whitaker Landscaping and Design, was built on the back of my grandfather's calloused hands and my father's stubborn pride, but by the time it trickled down to my generation, Daniel somehow managed to stand right in the sunlight, while I stayed buried in the dirt, making everything grow. I remember being 16, already managing half the accounts and writing up estimates for jobs Daniel could not even be bothered to attend, while Mom still introduced him at every dinner party like he was the second coming of John D. Rockefeller. "Oh, Daniel's got such a good head for business," she would croon, even as I balanced the checkbook and organized the schedules that kept the whole damn operation afloat. Over the years, it stopped surprising me, but it never stopped burning a slow, ugly hole inside my chest. The final insult came on a sticky August evening, the air thick and wet with the kind of late summer heat that makes you feel like you are breathing through a wet rag. We were all sitting around the patio table, beer bottles sweating onto the old wood, citronella candles flickering weakly against the mosquitoes, when Mom cleared her throat in that self-important way she had when she wanted to make some grand announcement. I already knew it was coming because I could see it in the smug way Daniel leaned back in his chair, arms folded behind his head like he had just scored the winning touchdown. "I have decided," she said, her voice sticky sweet, "that it's time for me to step back from the business. And naturally, Daniel will take over as owner." She beamed like a game show hostess revealing a brand new car, while Dad nodded along like one of those bobblehead dolls you stick on a dashboard. Nobody even looked at me. Not really. Not until I stood up to clear the plates, and even then it was with that fleeting, dismissive glance you give a waitress at a truck stop. I smiled then, or at least, I made my mouth stretch into something that looked enough like a smile that nobody questioned it. After all, what else was I going to do? Throw a fit like some spoiled brat? Scream and pound the table until the citronella candles flipped over and the whole damn patio went up in flames? No, that was not my style. I had learned long ago that the best revenge is slow, quiet, and absolutely devastating. So I stacked the dishes, laughed at Daniel's lazy jokes, and even poured him another beer when he bragged about how he was going to take Whitaker Landscaping to the next level, like he hadn't spent the last 15 years avoiding the place like it was radioactive. I asked him sweetly if he wanted any help with the transition, and he waved me off with that same casual arrogance he had always worn like a badge of honor. "Relax, Sam," he said, clapping me on the shoulder with just a little too much force, like a football coach trying to psych up the water boy. "I've got this. Maybe you can stick around and handle the boring paperwork, the stuff you're good at." It took every ounce of strength I had not to smash the beer bottle over his head right then and there. Instead, I just smiled wider, the muscles in my face aching with the effort, and said, "Sure, Danny. Whatever you need." I even winked at him, the way a snake might wink right before it strikes. That night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom with the ceiling fan clacking overhead and the humid air pressing down like a weight on my chest, I thought about every late night I had spent reworking contracts, every early morning I had spent scraping frost off the equipment, every weekend I had given up because some client had decided last minute they needed a rush job before their daughter's graduation party. I thought about the vacations I had skipped, the birthdays I had missed, the boyfriends who had gotten sick of waiting around for me to have a life outside of the family business. I thought about all of it, and then I made a decision. The next day, while Daniel basked in his new title and Mom planned a transition celebration complete with balloons and a sheet cake from the grocery store bakery, I started quietly gathering my things. I copied contact lists onto a flash drive, organized client files into neat folders, and smiled and nodded whenever Daniel swaggered past my desk talking about rebranding and synergy. Words he probably picked up from some YouTube video he half-watched between football games. No one noticed when I started slipping away. No one ever really had. I was invisible when I built the business, and I was invisible when I dismantled it, one careful piece at a time. At dinner that night, Daniel popped a bottle of cheap champagne and made a toast to new beginnings while Mom dabbed tears from her eyes and Dad made a long, rambling speech about passing the torch. I laughed at all the right places, clinked my glass against theirs, and even posed for pictures, my arms slung casually around Daniel's broad, oblivious shoulders. Inside, though, I was already gone. And soon enough, they would know exactly what it meant to underestimate the ghost they had created. It did not even take Daniel a full day to start acting like he was the CEO of some Fortune 500 company, the kind who slaps his own name on the front door in gold letters and struts around like he invented landscaping itself. Even though he could barely tell a tulip from a damn turnip if you handed him a picture book. From the minute Mom handed him the keys to the office, literally, with a shiny red ribbon on the keyring like he was graduating kindergarten, Daniel swaggered in like he was about to revolutionize the entire industry. Talking a mile a minute about expanding our brand, streamlining operations, and enhancing client engagement, none of which he could even begin to define if you cornered him with a whiteboard and a dictionary. I stood behind the front desk that first morning, sorting through invoices like I always did, while he paced the floor and threw around words he barely understood, holding court for anyone who would listen, which basically meant our part-time receptionist Cheryl, who kept nodding so aggressively I thought her neck might snap. Daniel kept bragging about how he had big ideas and how he would fix the old ways that were holding us back, even though the old ways he was trashing were the exact reason we still had a business at all after 2 recessions and a pandemic that nearly gutted half the town. At one point, he even gathered the tiny staff we had left, all 6 of us, including the guys who actually mowed lawns and trimmed hedges, and gave a speech so packed with cliches it could have been printed on the side of a cereal box. I remember standing there, arms crossed, watching him pace in front of the dusty corkboard where we used to pin up job requests, and thinking, God, you really believe your own bullshit, don't you? He started with some nonsense about turning a new leaf, which would have been mildly clever if it was not so painfully obvious, and then launched into a full monologue about how he had studied modern business practices and would be optimizing workflow. Whatever the hell that meant. At one point he even said, and I swear on every pothole I ever filled, after running this place for nearly 25 decades, it's time we caught up with the times, and not a single person corrected him. 25 decades, folks. That's 250 years, longer than America has been a country, and not one person said a word because we were all too busy trying not to laugh or cry or maybe both. I caught Cheryl's eye across the room, and she quickly looked away, chewing her lips so hard I thought she might start bleeding. Nobody wanted to be the one to point out that Daniel could not even do basic math on his big day, and honestly, I did not either. Let him think he was some brilliant innovator. It would only make what came next even sweeter. After the speech, Daniel clapped his hands together like a preacher wrapping up Sunday service and told everyone to get back to work because we're gonna hit the ground running, and I swear to God I could almost hear a collective sigh of despair ripple through the crew. Everyone shuffled back to their jobs, heads down, and Daniel swaggered into what was now his office, which used to be Dad's office, which used to be Grandpa Whitaker's before that, and for a moment, just a brief flicker of a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Because he had no idea, absolutely no clue, that he had just inherited an empty throne. I spent the rest of the day doing exactly what I had been doing for the last 15 years, managing the chaos Daniel did not even know existed, juggling client calls, adjusting schedules, smoothing over mistakes the field guys made, balancing the books so the checks did not bounce, and fixing the little things that kept the place humming. Daniel poked his head out a few times to throw out buzzwords like strategic pivot and customer-first initiative, but mostly he stayed holed up in the office, probably Googling how to run a company and printing out inspirational quotes to staple on the bulletin board. Later that afternoon, when he wandered out to ask about some missing paperwork, papers that had been on Dad's desk for the last 6 months, buried under pizza coupons and half-finished crossword puzzles, I told him sweetly that I had been cleaning up some files, making everything nice and neat for him. He just nodded, not even registering the faint edge in my voice, and went right back to his new office like a king surveying his soon-to-be collapsing kingdom. It was almost too easy. I smiled to myself as I clicked through the last of the client lists on my computer, transferring names, numbers, and notes onto the flash drive tucked safely into the bottom of my purse. Every handshake, every favor, every late-night emergency call I had handled with grace while Daniel was out getting drunk at the bar, they were all mine now. Not on company servers, not backed up to the cloud, not anywhere Daniel could find them. As the sun set and the office emptied out, Daniel locked the front door with a little too much ceremony, like a child pretending to be a grown-up, and I watched him through the glass as he fumbled with the keys, grinning like he had just conquered Rome. I leaned back in my chair, stretched my arms overhead, and allowed myself a small, satisfied sigh. Let him enjoy it, I thought. Let him think he was finally living his birthright. Because the truth was, by the time he realized what he had really inherited, it would already be far too late. There are things in business they will never teach you in any fancy college seminar or overpriced webinar run by some grinning clown in a rented suit, and one of the biggest lessons is this: loyalty is never written in ink. And it sure as hell is not stapled to some dusty old contract in a filing cabinet nobody has opened in years. Loyalty is built in the rain when you show up to fix a flooded backyard at 6 in the morning because the client is crying over her ruined wedding party. Or in the blistering heat when you stay 2 hours after closing to fix a broken sprinkler system because you know that Little League coach has his championship game the next morning and 300 screaming kids are depending on it. That kind of loyalty, the kind I spent 15 years building, belonged to me, not the name on the trucks or the faded green logo on the work shirts, and certainly not to Daniel, who could not have built a campfire with a box of matches and a gallon of gasoline, let alone relationships that mattered. So while Daniel was busy redesigning the company's logo and brainstorming slogans that sounded like bad fortune cookies, I was quietly and methodically gathering up every thread that tied the heart of Whitaker Landscaping to me personally, pulling each one free without so much as a ripple on the surface. I spent the better part of a week weaving my escape plan so carefully that no one, not even the guys I had worked alongside for years, suspected a thing. Every time I picked up the phone and a client asked if I would still be their point of contact under the new leadership, I smiled into the receiver and said, "Of course, we'll make sure you're taken care of," then casually confirmed their personal emails, cell phone numbers, preferred times for contact, details Daniel would never even think to ask, much less appreciate. During lunch breaks, when Daniel disappeared to network at the golf course or the country club, usually just an excuse to waste company money on beer and cart rentals, I sat quietly at my desk, transferring contacts onto my private drive. I had names, addresses, kids' birthdays, anniversaries, even notes on who preferred which kinds of flowers for spring planting and who absolutely hated the color yellow in their gardens. These were not just clients. They were people I had cared about, earned trust from, worked side by side with until the sweat soaked through every seam of my shirt. By the time Friday rolled around, my collection was complete. Every important client, every VIP who kept the business afloat during the lean months, was now safely accounted for, tucked into a small, unmarked flash drive that fit neatly into the lining of my battered leather purse. It felt almost surgical, The way I had extracted the soul of the business without anyone noticing, and by the time I powered down my computer that evening, the office might as well have been a hollowed-out carcass, still standing, but already dead inside. The final piece of my plan was the resignation letter, a simple sheet of white paper, no company letterhead, no fancy formatting, just plain black ink and a few brutally honest sentences that would leave no room for confusion. I typed it slowly, savoring every word, every keystroke a tiny act of rebellion against a lifetime of being overlooked, underappreciated, and passed over. The letter read, "Daniel, this is not goodbye. It's just me setting you free. From me. I hope you enjoy what you fought so hard to claim. Take good care of what's left." Samantha, no anger, no begging, no explanations, just a clean, precise cut, the kind that bleeds the most, because it feels almost gentle at first. I printed it out on the old office printer, the one that jammed if you looked at it wrong, folded it neatly in thirds, and sealed it inside a plain envelope with Daniel's name scrawled across the front in sharp, decisive letters. The sun was setting by the time I walked back into the office, the golden light slanting through the windows and turning the dust in the air into tiny, swirling galaxies. Daniel's new desk was cluttered with business cards he had ordered in bulk, boxes of promotional pens with the misspelled company slogan growing together since 1975's, and at least 3 empty coffee cups. He was out somewhere, no doubt blowing more money on client dinners or team-building happy hours, and the office was blissfully quiet, the hum of the aging HVAC system the only sound. I placed the envelope squarely in the center of Daniel's desk, right on top of a glossy new binder labeled Business Strategy 2.0, which looked suspiciously like it had been printed straight from some free template online. I stood there for a moment, hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk, and let the weight of what I had done settle deep into my bones. It was not guilt that filled me, not sadness, or even anger anymore. It was a strange, fierce kind of peace, like standing on the deck of a ship you just finished setting ablaze, watching the flames crackle and dance while the smoke curled high into the endless sky. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I felt untouchable, free from the invisible leash I had spent my whole life pretending I did not feel tugging at my throat. I turned off the lights on my way out, locking the door behind me and dropping the keys through the mail slot with a metallic clatter that echoed in the empty hallway. Outside, the parking lot was bathed in deep orange light, the edges of the asphalt still radiating heat from the long summer day. I slid behind the wheel of my beat-up Chevy, started the engine, and drove away without looking back even once. The flash drive sat heavy in my purse, a tiny weight that carried more power than Daniel would ever realize until it was far, far too late. He had the keys to the kingdom, sure, but I had taken the people. And without them, he would soon learn that all he was left holding was the crumbling shell of a legacy built on the back of someone he never even bothered to see. By the time he opened that envelope, the first cracks would already be spreading through his shiny new empire, and the real collapse would be coming fast behind. The morning Daniel opened the letter, I imagine the sun was probably shining just a little too brightly through the office windows, casting that kind of harsh, unflattering light that makes everything look a little more tired and worn out than it does in the softer hours of the day. I imagine he was feeling pretty good about himself, too, sitting behind the big desk he had claimed without lifting a single calloused finger to earn it, sipping burnt coffee from a mug he probably ordered online that said "World's Best Boss" or some equally ridiculous nonsense, spinning slowly back and forth in the chair like a kid pretending to be a captain at sea. I was not there to see it, of course, but I knew Daniel better than he knew himself, had spent my whole life watching him bluff and bluster his way through every hand he was ever dealt. So it was not hard to picture how he would have torn open the envelope with a casual flick of his wrist, expecting maybe a note of congratulations, a checklist of reminders, or hell, even a groveling promise of my eternal loyalty. For a few seconds, maybe even a full minute, I bet he sat there smirking, thinking he had finally won the long, Slow battle he never even understood he was losing. Then he read the words. It probably took a few heartbeats longer than it should have for the meaning to sink in, for the realization to start seeping into his thick skull that the neatly typed letter in his hand was not a roadmap to success, but a ticking time bomb he never saw coming. I imagine he frowned, crumpling the paper in his hand without even realizing it, reaching for his phone, for the office line, for some kind of anchor to stop the sinking feeling already pulling at his gut. The first clue would have been the silence. The phones, usually a constant buzz of clients calling to confirm appointments, request changes, or book new jobs, sat dead on the desk, their little red lights stubbornly unblinking. He probably tried calling out, punching in the speed dial numbers I had memorized and programmed years ago, only to find them ringing into endless voids, no callbacks, no assurances, no friendly voices telling him they would see him Monday with the down payment check ready. Next, the emails. I had thought about deleting the accounts, really I had, but in the end, it felt more poetic to simply let them exist, ghostly shells floating in cyberspace, unread and unanswered. I had rerouted the important messages weeks ago, setting up quiet little forwarding rules that funneled everything critical straight into my private inbox. So when Daniel sat there furiously refreshing his inbox, watching emails bounce back with little cold notices about undeliverable addresses and user not found, I imagine the sweat started to bead at his temples. The way it used to when Dad caught him sneaking out after curfew. The real panic, though, would have started when the clients themselves called. Because a few of them did call out of habit, maybe, or because they had not yet heard the news through the grapevine, and when they did, they asked for me, always for me. Is Samantha available? They would say, politely but firmly, and when Daniel stammered out that Samantha was no longer with the company and everything is fine, there would be a long, telling pause, the kind of pause that stretches a second into something that feels like a mile, followed by a curt, professional thank you, well be in touch, before the line went dead. I imagine the look on Daniel's face in those moments, the dawning horror, the creeping understanding that he had not inherited a thriving empire, but a hollow stage set, propped up by years of work he never even saw happening. I imagine he tore through the office like a man possessed, ripping open drawers, scouring the filing cabinets, dialing my number over and over until his thumb ached, each call going straight to voicemail, each message left increasingly frantic, increasingly desperate. He must have texted me a dozen times that day, the first few messages cocky and dismissive, trying to bluff his way back into control. Hey, Sam, just saw your note. No hard feelings, right? Call me when you get a chance. Then a little sharper, a little less confident. Sam, I need those client files. Seriously, we need to talk. And finally, the mask slipping, the panic bleeding through in every hurried, clumsy word. Sam, please. Where are you? Clients are bailing. Phones are dead. I don't know what to do. I let them pile up, each little ding of my phone a tiny victory, a confirmation that the plan I had spent weeks constructing was unfolding exactly as intended. I sat at my kitchen table, drinking lukewarm coffee and sorting through my own stack of paperwork, business licenses, vendor agreements, a brand new logo design printed out on thick cardstock, feeling more at peace than I had in years. When the knocking started, I knew who it would be before I even glanced at the peephole. Daniel stood on the other side of my front door, his face red and sweaty, hair sticking to his forehead, suit jacket askew like he had wrestled it on in a hurry. He pounded again, calling my name, begging me to open up, to just talk to him, promising that we could work something out if I would just come back, just fix it, just save him from the mess he had not even realized he was drowning in until it was far, far too late. I stood there, inches away from him, heart pounding not with fear or sadness, but with a fierce, almost giddy sense of satisfaction, and I did nothing. No answer, no explanation, no lifeline thrown to the brother who had spent his whole life standing on my back to reach a little higher. Let him knock. Let him plead. The hammer had dropped, and it was no longer my hand holding the nails. There is a strange kind of quiet that falls over your life when you finally walk away from everything that used to tie you down, and it is not the kind of silence that feels lonely or hollow, but the kind that stretches out before you like an empty road at sunrise, full of possibility, humming low and steady under your skin. That was the feeling that wrapped itself around me as I sat on my front porch that morning, a chipped mug of black coffee balanced between my hands, the bitter steam curling up into the cool autumn air while the world slowly woke up around me. The street was quieter than usual, the early birds already off to work, the retirees still tucked into their morning routines of newspapers and half-eaten toast. And for once, I was not part of the rush, not chained to a desk or a truck or a ringing phone demanding that I fix someone else's mistakes. I was just there, breathing, sipping, existing without apology or explanation, and it tasted better than any paycheck or pat on the back I had ever received in that office I left behind like a snake sheds its old, useless skin. Neighbors wandered past in the slow, meandering way people do when the weather starts turning crisp and the air smells like leaves and wood smoke, and a few of them paused to wave or call out across the lawn, their voices bright and curious. "Heard you're working on something new," old Mr. Reeves shouted, tipping his battered Red Sox cap back on his forehead as he shuffled by with his dog pulling at the leash. "Bet it's gonna be a hell of a thing," Mrs. Carter added from the sidewalk, her shopping bags swinging from each arm like old-fashioned scales weighing judgment and gossip in equal measure. I just smiled and lifted my coffee cup in a half salute, letting them think whatever they wanted to think, because the truth was, they were not wrong. I was working on something new, something better, something that did not have the Whitaker name stamped on it like a brand burned into cattle. I had spent the last week laying the foundation for my own business, one where I called the shots, chose the clients, picked the projects that made sense, and left the ones that did not to rot in someone else's inbox. It was not flashy, not yet anyway, just a handful of loyal clients who had followed me without hesitation, people who understood that trust was worth more than a polished brochure or a slick website filled with empty promises. They had seen me show up when the storms came through, when the pipes burst, when the foundation cracked and the deadlines loomed, and that was worth more than anything Daniel could print on glossy cardstock and mail to the entire damn county. My phone buzzed against the worn wood of the porch railing, rattling slightly with the force of the incoming message, and for a moment I considered ignoring it, savoring the simplicity of another minute without any demands being placed on my time or my patience. But old habits die hard, so I picked it up and glanced at the screen, already knowing who it would be before I even read the name. Daniel. Another voicemail, the third one today, the 20th this week, each one a little more desperate, a little more raw, the polished veneer cracking away until only the scared, clueless boy underneath was left. I tapped the screen and held the phone to my ear, leaning back in my chair as his voice filled the space around me, hoarse and hurried, stumbling over itself in a way that was almost painful to listen to. "Sam, please," he said, and for once there was no arrogance, no bluster, just raw, ugly fear. I can't run this without you. Clients are leaving, the crews are quitting, the bank's calling about the loan payments. I don't know what to do. Please, just call me back. Please." I let the message play out, the silence stretching on for a few seconds longer than it needed to, as if he was waiting for me to magically appear and fix everything the way I always had. I stared out across the street, where a group of kids was setting up a lemonade stand with crooked cardboard signs and crumpled dollar bills stuffed into an old coffee can, and for the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely no pull to step in, to save the day, to shoulder the burden because no one else would. I could have called him back. I could have taken pity on him, marched back into that crumbling shell of a business and stitched it together one more time with bloody fingers and gritted teeth, just like I had so many times before when everyone else stood around and wrung their hands. I could have been the good daughter, the loyal sister, the invisible workhorse one more time. But I didn't. Instead, I finished my coffee, now lukewarm and bitter in a way that felt oddly fitting, and set the empty mug down on the armrest beside me. I watched the kids across the street argue over whose turn it was to shout at passing cars, their voices high and eager, and so sure of their little world, and I allowed myself a small, crooked smile. Maybe I had burned a bridge. Maybe I had just built a better one. The thing about bridges, after all, is that they are only useful if they take you somewhere worth going. And for the first time in my life, I was finally headed somewhere that belonged to me alone.